The July heat pressed down like a heavy blanket, thick enough to taste in the air, making every small emotion feel bigger and every harsh glance sting a little more. I stood at the edge of my parents' backyard, trying to blend into the shade of an old maple tree while watching the same familiar scene unfold for the 15th year in a row. My brother Marcus stood proudly at the grill, flipping burgers as if he were preparing a feast for royalty. His wife Jennifer arranged bowls of potato salad with the same perfect smile she wore at every family gathering. Their 3 kids darted across the lawn, shrieking and laughing, kicking up dust in the hot sun. My sister Amanda sat sunk into a lawn chair, scrolling through her phone with her sunglasses slipping down her nose, barely aware of anything outside her screen. This was the annual Thompson family barbecue, and just like always, everyone showed up with the same smiles, the same small talk, and the same quiet judgment that slipped through the cracks whenever they looked at me. I was 31, and in their eyes, still the one who had never lived up to anything. Mom poked her head out of the kitchen window and called out, "Sarah, honey, could you bring out the condiments?" Her voice floated over the yard, sweet but stretched thin from the heat. I nodded, grateful for a moment away from all the noise and faces, and hurried inside where the cool air felt like a gift. I grabbed the mustard and ketchup bottles, took a slow breath, and walked back out again. By the time I returned, Marcus had gathered a little crowd around the grill, talking proudly about his new promotion at the marketing firm. Everyone leaned in with bright smiles and polite admiration. Jennifer rested a hand on his arm like he'd invented fire. Their oldest, Tyler, stood beside him wearing the same smug look Marcus had mastered years ago. I set the condiments on the table and reached for a paper plate, trying to make myself invisible. That was when Tyler's voice cut through the chatter. "Charity cases eat last," he said, loud enough to make sure the sound carried. His grin widened as his siblings giggled behind their hands. Conversation stuttered for a moment. A few relatives glanced toward me, then quickly looked away like eye contact would burn them. Marcus obviously heard his son. He kept flipping burgers, a tiny smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. Jennifer let out a small laugh she tried to hide behind her hand. My father stood by the cooler with a beer in his hand. Our eyes met briefly before he turned away first. I held Tyler's stare for a moment, long enough to see exactly where he had learned that kind of cruelty. Kids didn't invent this stuff. They learned it from the adults who taught them silence was approval. "Understood," I said softly. I placed the unused plate back on the stack and headed toward the side gate. "Sarah, don't be dramatic," Amanda called without looking up from her phone. "He's just a kid." I didn't answer. The gate clicked shut behind me, and someone laughed somewhere behind me, the sound drifting on the heavy summer air. My apartment was 40 minutes away. I changed into clean clothes, sat on my couch, and stared at my phone in the quiet room. I wasn't angry anymore. That stage had passed years ago. Now everything just felt slow and tired, like dragging myself uphill in heat that never broke. At 9:30 that night, my phone buzzed. Dad had texted, "The business needs your investment. Can we talk tomorrow?" I stared at the message for a long time without moving. Thompson and Associates, the consulting firm he had spent 3 decades building. Marcus was the VP. Amanda handled a true family company, except they never once offered me a position, never once acted like I belonged. 3 years ago, when the company's Western expansion crumbled, Dad hinted they needed investors. Anonymous was fine, he said. Over time, I moved $800,000 through my investment firm into their company. Then another $4.2 million over 2 more years. Without knowing it, I had become the owner of 37% of Thompson and Associates. Dad still held 41%, Marcus 15%, and Amanda 7%. They had no idea I was the second largest owner. Sterling Capital Group held my shares on paper. I typed a brief reply, "Never again." Then opened my email and wrote to my investment manager, David Chin, effective immediately. "I want to divest all holdings in Thompson and Associates. Begin the process tomorrow morning. I want clean separation within 30 days. I hit send and powered off my phone. The next morning I went to work my financial analyst job at a mid-sized investment firm. My family always called it average, unremarkable, not much more than counting other people's money. What they didn't know was that I had spent years building my own portfolio quietly, turning my grandmother's small inheritance into a fortune that would have stunned them. At tea lunch, I switched my phone back on. 7 missed calls from Dad, 4 from Marcus, and 11 messages. I deleted all of them without opening a single one. Then I called David. It started, he said. I informed their accountant this morning. Per the shareholder agreement, they get first opportunity to buy your shares at fair market value. I had a valuation done last month. Your 37% is worth 11.4 million right now. How long until they know it's me? I asked. They figured it out. I spoke with Richard Thompson an hour ago. He asked me to have you call him. I told him all communication goes through me. Perfect. Proceed. That evening, my father came to my apartment. I watched through the peephole as he knocked, waited, and knocked again. His face looked washed out, tired. 5 minutes passed before he finally left. More messages arrived afterward. Mom, Marcus, Amanda, even Jennifer, each one claiming it was all a misunderstanding, begging to talk, insisting that family doesn't do this to family. I thought about Tyler's grin, Jennifer's laugh, and my father looking away. On day 3, David called again. Thompson and Associates doesn't have the money to buy you out. Their bank refuses to extend more credit. Marcus called me this morning, he added. He thinks you might accept less money for family harmony. I told him shareholder agreements don't include harmony. A smile slipped out despite everything. What can they do? I asked. They can search for outside investment. They can try to get another loan, though their bank already said no. Or they can find an outside buyer for your shares, which means taking on a partner who might want a seat on their board. It may take 60 to 90 days. And until then, you still own 37%, meaning they can't make major decisions without your approval. Make sure they understand that. On day 5, my mother came to my office. The receptionist called into the conference room, unsure. She says she's your mother. Tell her I'm in meetings all day. I watched her from behind the glass window, standing in the lobby with her purse clutched in front of her, looking smaller than I had ever seen her. After 20 long minutes, she left. Their messages changed then. Anger replaced sweetness. How could I do this? Did I know what this would do to the company? To the employees? To the family? I let every message sit unanswered. On day 8, Marcus showed up at my apartment building. He waited 3 hours in the parking lot. I watched from behind the blinds as he paced, made calls, sat in his car, leaned his head against the steering wheel, and finally drove away. That night, David forwarded an email chain. Their primary lender wanted an emergency meeting. The bank needed clarity on the sudden shift in ownership before approving any more credit. Without that approval, the company couldn't renew its equipment lease next month. Their entire infrastructure ran on those leased servers. I sat quietly as David explained. Their attorney called too, he added, worried about the firm's future. I told her your decision was final. On day 10, their largest client, Greystone Industries, sent a letter asking whether the ownership change would affect service quality. 32% of the firm's revenue hung in that single letter. Marcus was probably losing sleep by then. On day 12, David called again, his voice steady as always. They found a potential buyer for your shares. A private equity firm called Westmore Partners. They're offering $10.8 million, slightly below our valuation, but within a reasonable range. Westmore wants 2 board seats as part of the deal. What does that mean for Thompson and Associates? It means your father and brother will have to answer to outside investors for the first time. Major decisions will require board approval. Westmore will want quarterly performance surveys, efficiency audits, probabilism restructuring. What did they say? Richard Thompson asked if he would reconsider. He said he was sorry about what happened at the barbecue. He said that to you? Yes. He seemed quite distressed. I thought about that for a long time after we hung up. Sorry about what happened at the barbecue. As if it was a singular incident, not a pattern stretching back years. On day 15, Amanda managed to corner me at a coffee shop near my office. I didn't see her until she was already sitting across from me. You're destroying Dad's legacy, she said without preamble. Her eyes were red over a stupid comment from a child. This isn't about Tyler. Then what is it about money? Because we can work with top payment plan. We can find a way to buy you out that doesn't involve selling toe vultures. It's not about money either. Then what? Sarah, what do you want? I looked at her directly. I want you to think about every family gathering for the past 10 years. Every dinner, every holiday, every barbecue. I want you to count how many times someone made a comment about my job, my apartment, my life choices. I want you to remember how many times you laughed along or said nothing or told me not to be so sensitive. We were joking. You were joking. I was being erased. Amanda's face crumpled. This will ruin Dad. The business is his whole life. He should have thought about that before he taught his grandson that some family members are worth less than others. She left without another word. The deal with Westmore Partners closed on day 28. I received a wire transfer for $10.8 million. David sent me the final paperwork and a brief note. Client separation achieved. Thompson and Associates now has 2 board members from Westmore Partners. They are implementing an immediate operational rev. The first board meeting happened 3 days later. David had contacts at Westmore and heard the details. The 2 new board members, Catherine Rodriguez and James Park, had come prepared with questions. They wanted to see 5 years of financial statements, complete employee performance reviews, justification for every executive salary, and a detailed analysis of client retention rates. My father had presented the company's history, the relationships he'd built, the reputation they'd maintained. Catherine listened politely. Then as Kedwe, their profit margins had declined 3 over 2 years despite revenue growth. Marcus tried to explain their expansion strategy. James asked why they'd expanded into territories with lower profit potential when their core market still had room for growth. Amanda's department was questioned extensively. How many employees? What was their turnover rate? Why did they need 3 full-time HR staff for a 40-person company? Amanda stammered through her responses. The meeting lasted 4 hours. At the end, Catherine outlined Westmore's expectations. Detailed quarterly reports, efficiency provisant, possible restructuring. The phrase possible restructuring hung in the air like a threat. I heard through the family grapevine cousins on Dawn's who still reached out occasionally that Marcus had actually cried in the parking lot after that meeting. Jennifer had to drive him home. Dad had been insolent for days, just sitting in his home office staring at papers. The business will survive. David assured me Westmore specialized in turning around mid-sized firms. They'd make it more efficient, probably more profitable. But it wouldn't be the Thompson family business anymore. It would be a company that happened to employ some Thompsons. My father now had to present quarterly permanent goals to people who didn't care about his 30-year legacy, only about return on investment. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt quiet. 3 months after the barbecue, I received a letter, actual paper in the mail. My father's handwriting on the envelope. Inside was a single page. Sarah, you understand now what we did. What I did? I taught my children and grandchildren that success looks a certain way. And in Yoni who didn't fit that picture wasn't worth the same respect. I taught him that some people eat first and some people eat last. I'm sorry it took love and everything to see how wrong I was. I know this apology doesn't fix anything. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that I finally understand. The business will survive. We'll adapt to our new reality. But I've lost something more important than Thompson and Associates. I've lost my daughter. That's my fault. Not yours. I hope someday you find peace with whatever you decide about us. Dad, I put the letter in a drawer and died in Trespent. 6 months later, Tyler sent me a message on social media. Just 3 words. I'm sorry. I stared at it for a long time. He was 13 now. Maybe old enough to understand. Maybe not. I typed back. Thank you for saying that. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't reconciliation. It was just acknowledging that words matter, that cruelty has consequences, that charity cases sometimes hold all the cards. I never went back to another family barbecue. But sometimes late at night, I thought about what David had said about family harmony clauses, how shareholder agreements are built on clear terms and fair valuations, not on blood relations and assumed loyalty. Maybe that was the lesson. Maybe the real charity had been mine all along, pretending that their version of family was worth the price of me dignity. I'd stopped paying that debt, and I'd never been wealthier.